everybody to say the invocation. Let's just do the pledge today. I'll lead. I pledge allegiance to the United States
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This is the Island Planning Commission special call work session, I guess. Stephanie?
All right, thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. Stephanie Leaf, Planning and Zoning Division Manager. We've got an hour designated for this. So what we would like to do with you all this evening is provide a training. So for some of you that have been serving on the commission, it'll be a refresher for you. And then those of you who are new, there'll be some new information in here. So I'll present a few things, kind of more from like what the staff's involved in, the kind of the staff's role with the commission, and then I'll turn it over to Senior Assistant County Attorney Will Worley, and he'll go through a variety of different legal matters. So before an application gets to you all, for all of our planning applications, we do go through a development review process. And so we do have a development review team that is set up that goes through a variety of different elements to ensure that a plan is complete, an application is complete, that plan does fit all the different codes that are in, you know, whether it's zoning ordinance or whether it's stormwater regulations or whatever that particular reviewer might be responsible for reviewing. And so the applications that you all see, they go through this process, site plans, rezones, conditional or special use permits, text amendments. We also have the village preservation applications that come before you all, and a lot of times those do not go through a full development review team process because a lot of it is, you know, specific to design, but there are some applications, if they are more detailed or more developments part of it, that they might go through that process. So our development review team is kind of made up of these different entities. We've got county engineering, county public works, Joint Water and Sewer Commission, the State Department of Health, which is our environmental health division, the county fire department, planning, building inspection, GIS and mapping, and then the airport commission also sits on our development review team as well. And a lot of what they have an interest in is both on St. Simons and on the mainland. We do have an airport surface overlay that, depending on how close the property is to one of the airports, there may be some restrictions on how high that building can go, and there may be additional requirements with the FAA that they need to submit to. So our airport keeps an eye on that with our applications that come through. And sorry, these colors are a little light. These are hard to see, but if anyone wants to see these after the meeting, I can email them out. But these are some flow charts for our different applications, kind of running through our whole process. So, you know, they come into our office at intake. They get reviewed through our system. Currently, we use a system called Inform, but we just started a transition to a new program called OpenGov. And so anyone who works in the development industry that is used to submitting applications into our office, soon you'll be working through a program called OpenGov that we are trusting to be more user-friendly. A lot of comments should be more visible to applicants that are submitting. You know, some of the things that we'll also gain from this is just more transparency for citizens. So we're going to be having a more robust ability for citizens to view details about applications that are pending. So right now we have on our website application, names and maybe some limited information, but through the OpenGov process and system, we'll be able to have a little bit more interaction with those applications, and citizens can get more information about something happening in their neighborhood or what they're interested in. So we look forward to kind of seeing that evolve over really the next 18 months or so. So it's not going to be real soon, but about the next 18 months.
Stephanie, would that process be such that the public can look at the application when it's submitted, and then as time goes on and comments are added, they can see those as well?
That is what I think we'll have to really narrow down exactly what elements of those applications, because there's some elements that are not subject to open records, and so there might be some either confidential information or personal information that an app that that's not going to be public. But we'll be looking at exactly what will be available, but we do, we would like, folks to be able to see a plan and when it has been revised. So a lot of times we have, open records requests for that level of information.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
But we'll be working with the development community as we start getting closer to building this out to train on this and kind of get feedback and, make sure it's working for everybody before it really goes live. So this just with the flow chart goes through, kind of who's reviewing it, development review team, and then depending on the type of application, so like a site plan, for example, once it goes to the development review team, it doesn't come to you all, does not get scheduled for a planning commission until all the reviews are considered compliant. So that means every reviewer has looked at it and does not see any kind of violations of code or any issues, and they say, okay, well, it's compliant with the codes that we reviewed, go ahead and put it on a planning commission agenda. There are times that you may see an application that is considered non-compliant by one of the reviewers, but it is because you have the final authority on some element of it. So like a good example of that for the Islands Planning Commission is the tree plan. So we have a county arborist that reviews all the tree plans, checks for compliance with the St. Simons Island Tree Canopy Preservation Ordinance. However, the Planning Commission can issue variances. So if there's elements of the plan that are not compliant, the arborist will note that it's not compliant, A, B, and C items, but this variance, the only authority is the Planning Commission. So we would put that on an agenda, outline those issues, and then it would be up for the commission to decide whether they approve that plan and want to issue that variance to the tree plan.
I assume the DRT meetings will still be open to the applicant, right? I mean, they can make an appointment, I guess, and come in to sit down with the DRT team and have their project reviewed.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll, as far as I know, unless something changes, from the county's direction, we'll still have our development review team meetings, every Wednesday. So they occur every Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. We're both in person at the county offices, downtown Brunswick, and they're also online. So if somebody wants to join, like we'll have applicants that are, based out of state, that they'll join online and talk with us about their questions.
Stephanie, most of the projects we see have already gone through that DRT process.
Correct.
And then also the applicant has probably sat down with the DRT team, most of them, I say, or some of them anyway.
Right.
Have sat down with the DRT team and gone through the application, and staff has alerted them to any issues that they may have with their application. Correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, quite a few applicants do, come down and sit down with us or join online. But I mean, at a minimum, the applicants have had interaction with either, majority of the DRT staff or some of them. We do assign a planner as a lead on all the projects, and so they are kind of the point person. So if there are some issues or maybe some, maybe an applicant's been trying to resolve an issue, they'll circle back and talk with the planner, and and the planner kind of takes the lead on trying to resolve the issues or make sure all the reviews are coming in a timely manner. And so we do have a lead assigned for each of our projects that functions as that. All right, then we'd have just a few other, the flow sheets, flow charts. So the rezones or text amendments, so rezone is, a parcel that is changing zoning to either planned development or a conventional zoning district. And then alternatively, we also have text amendment applications, which is, like you had one a few months ago where in the light industrial zoning district, there was the commission had initiated it, where we allowed cheerleading and dance studios in the light industrial zoning district. So that was an example of a text amendment where they follow the same process. They have a planning commission public hearing as well as a county commission public hearing. Anything that's a change to the whole zoning code requires it to go to the Mainland Planning Commission and the Islands Planning Commission and the Board of Commissioners. So it takes a little bit longer to get through, and sometimes we'll do a joint meeting just to go through that together with both commissions. But same thing, a rezone also goes through the development review team process. And as you're kind of aware, or folks that have been on the commission a little longer may be aware, a lot of times there's some details that come up with the rezone process, from citizens about traffic studies or maybe specific stormwater or drainage issues. The way the county has handled that is we like those issues to come to light at the rezone process, but we really deal with them later on in the process. So either it's at site plan or construction plans, and that's really where we dig into civil drawings and really get to the details of what's happening in a project. And yeah, conditional and special uses, those also have a hearing before you all, plus a hearing in front of the Board of Commissioners. And so this is an example of what we call the review history that comes from the development review team. And looks like we're kind of cut off on the side of the screen. But basically the review history will show who did the review of the application, what comments they had, and if they found the project was compliant or non-compliant, and or compliant with some comments. So sometimes that's where you might say, it meets everything for this particular stage of the process, but hey, when they apply for construction plan, this is what I want to see, and this is what's going to be required at that stage. And we try to do that as kind of an applicant heads up that this is going to be required of you at another stage of your process, just so you can be prepared for that. So you all see a copy of the review history in your application packets, just so you can kind of see that there has been a full review before you're seeing the application. And then after we've scheduled an application for a meeting, the staff does put together an agenda and staff reports for each of the agenda items. We do have a draft. We typically send the draft agenda to the chair to review in case there's any issues or the chair wants to revise anything. And then we have everything available to you the week prior of your meeting. And what staff does in those staff reports is, for all of these applications, the zoning code has specific standards of evaluation. So there's specific questions that kind of need to be answered and that you all need to basically make findings to when you're going to be approving or denying or making any kind of decision on the application. And so what staff does is provide some answers to those questions from the staff's professional opinion. Based on, like for the rezoning example, there's some questions about compliance with the comprehensive plan. So staff will include future land use map, an excerpt of that. Staff will also include, what area, I guess not area, but what segment of the future land use plan that this particular application sits in, just so you all can, have assistance in making that finding. The Islands Planning Commission traditionally has not desired recommendations from staff on applications, and we've brought this up over the years, and the Islands Planning Commission has typically said they would like to have all the information submitted to them, the plans, the staff reports, but not necessarily a staff recommendation. And so what you see in your staff report is an outline of the issues. What we often will say, have is like a suggested condition, or we'll kind of highlight some areas that we want to make sure that you see when you're reviewing it, or that you might want to really kind of hone in on a little more. So that's kind of how we sort of handle that in your report.
Does the Mainland Planning Commission get a staff recommendation?
They currently do on site plans, and I think it's just site plans. Yeah, just site plans right now for reasons, and I think conditional use permits. I think I'm trying to think, there hasn't been that many rezone recommendations on those. Okay, so rezones and conditional use permits, we are not doing recommendations on those.
No, but there's actually, there's no ordinance saying that we can't receive a staff recommendation, is there? Anything written down?
Right. Yeah. And I think we've looked into that before to see if that's a requirement or not a requirement. But that's why it really is kind of up to really decision of the commission, or whether the county directs us to do something different. By code, and Will can correct me if I'm wrong. By code, I don't believe there's anything that requires a recommendation or doesn't require one. So.
These are.
The ordinance is silent.
It doesn't address it one way or another, does it, Will?
Yeah. Historically, for a long time, IPC did get recommendations, and then a number of years back, they informed staff.
Oh, I remember. I wasn't too much in favor of that myself. It seems like if we have a professional staff, then certainly having a professional recommendation would be to our benefit. Mm-hmm. That's just me, folks.
Yeah, and it's yeah, I think and different communities do it different ways. I mean, it is probably more frequent that you see recommendations from staff, but it's not always in every community. So that's why it's something that could be determined by who's sitting in these chairs and what the county would like to do moving forward on this. So that's just kind of basically sort of what our staff role is with you all. And then I just want to kind of highlight a few other things that are going on. So every year we do budget for training for our planning commissioners and our Board of Appeals members. And so from time to time we will send you all information about upcoming trainings that you might be interested in attending. On May 17th up in Richmond Hill, and I sent out this a few weeks back, so I'll refresh and I'll send it back out because it's been a while since I've shared it with everyone. But there is a Planning and Zoning Training 101 that the Carl Vinson Institute of Government up at the University of Georgia holds. And the Coastal Regional Commission is going to be hosting that. They're our regional planning entity for our area. And it's a very, very good training. We've brought it to Glynn County actually a couple different times. I'm not sure if anyone has attended that that's on the board now. Yeah. We every few years we'll bring someone to Glynn County. It's a really excellent overview. So anyone who is new or wants a refresher, it's really good. So if I'll send out information again on this, but if you're interested, just let me know. And then upcoming in 2023, this is new information that y'all probably haven't seen because we just started pushing out information on it. The county is part of what's called a metropolitan planning organization, and it's basically our transportation planning entity for the county. It includes Jekyll Island, City of Brunswick, and unincorporated Glynn County. And we are undergoing a corridor study for Sea Island Road as part of the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is called BATS. It stands for Brunswick Area Transportation Study. So this group, BATS, is holding a public meeting on March 8th from 4 to 6 at Epworth by the Sea in the Pioneer Room. And basically what they are looking at doing is GDOT has, as part of their plans, a replacement of the Dunbar Creek Bridge on Sea Island Road. And what we wanted to do as an MPO was take a look at Sea Island Road and look at if any changes need to be made to that road to, that might impact what this bridge design will end up looking like. So the corridor is actually starting at Demery, study area. Starts at Demery and goes all the way to the Sea Island Gate. So it's a large area. This public meeting, the purpose is to really look at existing conditions and really hear from the community about what you want to make sure is considered and looked at in this study, any concerns you have about the current roadway. So it's really, and it's going to be open house style. You can come at any time between 4 and 6. We'll have our consultants there with some maps. We'll have comment cards. So please kind of share this information. It's on our county website, and our communication director is putting information out about it too. And
Sorry, who is the consultant?
the consultant is Michael Baker International, and Matt Bennett is our lead on that.
Okay.
Yep.
Stephanie Odessa has a question.
Will you be sending this information out?
Yeah, I can email it out to everybody. Yeah, that way those flow charts that weren't real visible, you all can see those. But I'll send this out to everybody.
Thank you.
And then those of you who've been on the commission are aware we've been working on our zoning code update for a few years now. We are getting ready actually to start back on that. There's a small, just kind of internal group or small group that's just reviewing a second draft before we start the public process and getting out to the public. So once that group kind of looks at it, then we will get that out to the public and have the public process start and reviewing that. And our consultant is still TSW, some of you know from previous meetings. And we're hoping to finish this up this year.
So will it start over like the other one did with like the public town hall meeting?
The public town, I don't know yet. Yeah, I think we're still really looking at how that process is gonna look starting over. So I don't know the answer to that yet. But stay tuned and we'll keep you all updated on kind of how that transpires. Hopefully in the next couple months we'll have a more knowledge about how we're going to move forward with the public process. And then the other thing we have going on this year is our update to our comprehensive plan. So our last kind of overhaul of the comprehensive plan was in 2018. And we're required, the state requires us to look at our comp plan every 5 years. And so this year, we're at that 5-year mark. And the Coastal Regional Commission is our consultant on this project. And so right now, we've been having some stakeholder group meetings that are open to the public. So we're going to have those on our website. And then we will have public meetings for the general public and have a public process. So we'll get you more information on that as that keeps rolling along.
You know, my understanding, the comprehensive plan is done every 5 years. You know, during that time, is it ever completed? Because I always hear the committees still continuously meeting, and never receive the final plan until it's time for to start the next 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what we do have that is kind of ongoing, so the comprehensive plan the plan itself was adopted in October of 2018, and so the comprehensive plan committee that had been established at that time did sunset when it was adopted. However, the kind of living document, well, that's a living document too, but what we do have that we continually work on is what's called a community work program, and it's has a lot of, that's really where the actions are outlined. So like one of the actions in the community work program was to update the zoning code and update the subdivision regulations. So we have been working on that continuously for several years. So that is something that we are supposed to be taking a look at that work program continuously and continuing to, because it had different thresholds of when projects were due. Some of them were near term, some of them were mid, some of them were long range. So that's something that as a county we continue to look at. So that might be what you're thinking about, because we do always kind of have something going on that's kind of associated with the comp plan or the work program. But we do have a new stakeholder group that just got created this year that is focused on this 5-year. And there are some members that also served on the last one, but there's some new members too. So, any other questions on anything on that? All right, well, good deal. I will turn it over to Will then. Thank you.
Now the real exciting stuff begins. You get to hear from an attorney, everyone's favorite thing.
We're excited.
So I think I know everyone here, but I'm Will Worley, Senior Assistant County Attorney. And I'm just going to cover a few topics in the time we have here. Open meetings, open records, conflict of interest and ethics, and parliamentary procedure. Let me say this is all going to be a very brief overview and is no way meant to be an in-depth training on all these things. So if you have any questions, stop me during the presentation. If you have questions afterwards too, I'll be happy to answer them for you. I wouldn't be a good attorney if I did not have a disclaimer in my presentation, which says basically the same thing that I just said. So we'll get started with open records. So as a local government entity, Glynn County and by extension the planning commissions are subject to the Georgia Open Records Act. And that means that the public is entitled to request and get copies of public records. A public record is defined as all documents, papers, letters, maps, books, tapes, computer-generated information, electronic information that is prepared, maintained, or received by the local government. So essentially what this means for y'all, anything you get as a tangible record at any point relating to your planning commission business is potentially a public record and subject to disclosure under the Open Records Act. That means emails, text messages, even if they're on your personal devices, if they're relating to county, your business, your duties as the planning commissioner, those are open, those are public records. Handwritten notes, agendas and support materials you might receive from staff for your agenda items, all that stuff is public records. And what that really means for y'all is anytime you get something like that, you need to retain it in the event that we do get a request for those records. So emails, text messages, the support documents you get, you need to retain those unless they're what the law calls ephemeral. So, if it's an email that says, hey, meeting's at 5 today, remind everyone meeting's at 5, and you say, great, that's not something you gotta retain, but anything substantive you need to retain. And Stephanie, I know in the past, or in the recent past, we've been providing planning commissioners with an official county email address. For y'all's convenience, if you wanna use that for all your planning commission business, that makes it easier to keep it separate from your personal account. And also too, it makes it easy, IT can a lot of times go and do searches for you if we get requests, and that way we don't have to burden you with your time to do that kind of stuff.
Not everyone has one set up, so if anyone wants that,
I don't think that.
yeah, let us know.
As a planning commission, you're also subject to the Georgia Open Meetings Act, which requires that the public meetings be open to the public. And the definition of a public meeting is the gathering of a quorum of the planning commission at which any official business, policy, or public matter is formulated, presented, discussed, or voted on. One of the key things to remember about this is anytime 4 of you get in a room, it's pretty much a public meeting. Even if you're not taking votes, if you're just discussing matters, for instance, this meeting we're in right now is an open meeting, public meeting. We had to follow all the rules for calling that meeting. So just keep in mind, anytime 4 of you are there to discuss planning commission business, that most likely is a meeting, and we're gonna need to follow the open meetings requirements.
The open meeting requirements, well, that means it has to be posted, right?
Right, that means we have to give notice to the public, at least 24 hours in advance, and that's usually reserved for emergency meetings. You have to post an agenda, which shows the time, place, and location of the meeting. You have to say what's gonna be discussed or voted on at that meeting, so there's a lot of requirements. Now, that stuff y'all don't necessarily need to worry about, because staff takes care of that for you, but just the idea that, anytime you're getting together in a group of 4, if y'all want to do something like that, we need to know so we can fulfill those duties. One thing's a little different, your bylaws allow for the chair to appoint subcommittees or committees to look at specific issues. That hasn't happened a lot. But and I think the bylaws say that it's a 3-person committee. That committee is also subject to the open meetings requirements. So in that case, if 2 of those committee members get together, that's a public meeting and needs to follow the rules as well.
So our committee meetings, are they required to be posted as well then?
Yes. The original formulation of the Open Meetings Act didn't require that, but there was a rewrite and some changes to it in 2013, which made clear that any subcommittee or anything of the larger body is also subject to those rules too. So I don't know that we've had maybe 1 or 2 subcommittees appointed since that time by the planning commissions, and we followed those rules when we did, but it's not happened a lot since then.
Right. Yeah, we've had 1 or 2.
We had one,
Yeah.
but we had to do.
Yeah, a couple
we
years
posted
ago, I
all
think
that.
we did, yeah. There's 2 types of open meetings, regular meetings. Those are just your meetings that are held in accordance with the regular schedule, your normal monthly meeting. And then special called meetings, those are any meeting, basically it's not a regular scheduled meeting. Work sessions like the one we're doing right now is considered a special called meeting. Or any regular meeting that's held at a different time or location than normal. We ran into this a lot during, a few years ago, because we had so many people attending IPC meetings, we would have to move them to other venues so we'd have enough seating for everybody. We did it at Epworth a lot, we did it at Sea Palms a lot, and because we were moving the location of the regular meeting, that's technically a special called meeting.
Well, going back just a moment, at the committee, if 2 members get together to discuss an item on the agenda, that's not considered a committee, is it? I mean,
No.
If we get on the phone and say, hey, did you look at something and?
Right, no, it would only apply, like I said, under y'all's bylaws, you as a chair, for instance, can say, hey, I want someone to study this issue. I'm gonna appoint a committee of 3 members to look at this and then report back to the IPC.
Right.
So when you form that committee, they are now subject, so anytime 2 of them get together, then yes, that would be a meeting. But on a normal basis, if you call up or have lunch with, Mr. Nash and say, hey, let's talk about this item that's on the agenda, that's not a meeting.
Okay.
Best thing is to not create committees.
Just wanna make sure.
Unless you, I mean, you know, like I said, it's not hard to, like, staff takes care of all that agenda stuff, you know, so we just need to have, you know, enough advance notice to send out the meeting notice and that sort of thing. Requirements of open meetings: public must be allowed access to all meetings. You must allow them to do visual and sound recordings. One exception to that is executive session, and there's a number of reasons why a body can go into executive session. About the only one that would apply to planning commission would be pending or potential litigation. You know, the other ones are personnel, land acquisition, that sort of stuff, which y'all don't really have a role in. So, and it's been a while since we had to do executive session for litigation for the planning commissions, I'm happy to say. But it has happened in the past. As we said earlier, you know, there's an agenda required for every meeting. Every matter that's expected to be considered at the meeting has to be on that agenda. We have to make it available prior to the meeting. Sometimes you'll get emails and stuff saying, oh, it's gotta be posted X number of days or at least a week in advance. There's no cut and dry, there's no requirement under the Open Meetings Act other than it has to be as far in advance as reasonably possible.
By what method does it have to be advertised? Is it newspaper always, or?
Website? No, you don't. You're
Website.
actually not even required to put it in the newspaper. Just post it. Actually, the meeting, the Open Meetings Act just requires it be posted online and at the location of the meeting itself. So,
So at the location of the meeting, like about 24 hours before?
yeah, I mean, you'll notice that we, when you come into the meeting, these meetings every time, there's a copy of the agenda
Right, so
posted
that
out
was
there.
put there yesterday,
Yeah.
perhaps?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you can add items that have not been put on the agenda if they are deemed necessary. The Open Meetings Act does not say what that means, and so it essentially means if you determine that it's necessary to address it at the meeting, you can vote to add that item to the agenda.
Good to know.
All votes must occur in the open meeting. And under the county's ordinances and y'all's bylaws, 4 affirmative votes are required to transact any business. And under the Open Meetings Act, a member is assumed to vote in favor unless they vote against an item or they indicate that they abstain. So if you ever are sitting there and you're against something, but you don't raise your hand when it says, you know, those opposed or anything like that, then under the meeting minutes, we're required to mark you as voting in favor.
Really?
Or if you don't vote, if you don't raise your hand at any point and don't say I abstain, then the Open Meetings Act requires us to record you as voting in favor.
So that applies to all agenda items?
Yes.
I'm trying to think in the past where we've had split votes, and so if somebody abstains and doesn't vote, then they would
Well,
be.
They can abstain.
Abstain.
They just have to
don't
indicate
say
that
they
abstain.
have.
Yeah.
And you don't have to give a reason for abstaining, right?
There's no requirement in the Open Meetings Act that you do so. Robert's Rules indicates that you should vote if you can, unless you have a conflict, but there's no requirement that you vote. So if you want to, there's no requirement that you give a reason for abstaining, but it's usually good practice to, you know, at least, under Robert's Rules, it's good practice to vote one way or the other unless you have a conflict. And that's more about, and we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get to parliamentary procedure, but that's more about the idea of Robert's Rules is to transact business and not to obstruct it.
Move business, right.
Yeah. Very quickly, violations of the Open Meetings Act basically negates any action that's taken at that meeting. So, if there was a meeting that happened and it wasn't open to the public or something like that, and you took a vote, then the Open Meetings Act says that vote is basically a nullity, and whatever action you took at that meeting would be void. There are also civil and criminal penalties for violation of the Open Meetings Act and the Open Records Act. The criminal penalty is a relatively new addition to that code. you could be subject to civil suit for violations of the Open Meetings Act. To my knowledge, there's only been one criminal prosecution for violation of the Open Records Act. That happened in the city of Atlanta a couple years ago. A person sent emails saying, lie to them and tell them there's no documents responsive to this request, so they got caught. But the penalties can be pretty steep.
Going back a moment, we've had this happen before. Back to the voting issue. We've had, and this is probably important for our newer members anyway, a failure of a motion is not an action.
Correct.
Right. And we've had that issue before where a motion failed and everyone assumed that we voted not, well, voted the other way, but you need to actually make a motion not to approve something.
Right. So, yeah, so for instance, a failed motion to approve does not
Right.
mean that it's denied. You still
Right.
need to make a motion to deny.
To deny.
Yeah.
Right.
And we'll cover that a little bit in parliamentary procedure as well. But yeah, that's one of the reasons why the requirement is that you need 4 votes to do anything. Because we did, at a certain point, have a lot of questions about, we might have a 3-3 vote, or we have a 3-2 vote, and 6 people are present, 1's abstaining. Does that, carry the motion and that sort of stuff. Under the penalties, the Attorney General has the authority to do enforcement actions. In addition to the penalties in the Open Meetings Act, violation of it could also constitute ground for removal by the Board of Commissioners, and that's in y'all's ordinances. Again, this is going to be a very brief conflict of interest ethics overview. So there's generally 2 sources of conflict of interest rules: state law and county ordinances. There's no statute or anything under state law. This is all case law. And so state law is basically that a public officer, which y'all are all public officers by virtue of being on the Planning Commission, it has a conflict of interest when they act on a specific matter and that matter directly and immediately affects your financial interest. So really what that means is if you have some sort of measurable financial gain that is going to be had from the actual item that you're voting on, then that can be considered a conflict of interest. And what that means is if a person is found to have voted on an item where they have a conflict of interest, that can, even if it was a 6-1 vote or a unanimous vote, that is grounds to overturn that decision. A good example under one of the cases is there was a case where a member of the Board of Commissioners voted on a rezoning item that was brought by a developer, and that board member was a subcontractor, and they worked for the applicant who was asking for the rezoning. And as a matter, I think they were a plumbing contractor, and they were the sole plumbing subcontractor that developer used. And the court said, well, that's a conflict of interest because you know that if you approve that rezoning, you're going to get a job out of that, and that's a direct financial benefit. So anytime you think you might have a financial gain from an item on there, it's a good idea to pick up the phone and give us a call and ask us about it. Under the county's ordinances, ours is a little more broad, whereas state law says if you have a direct financial interest in an item, the county's says if you have an indirect financial interest as well. Financial interest is defined in the ordinance. Any relationship from which you have received or are entitled to receive more than $50 a year, or if you hold a position in a business that is the subject of the application, you're an officer, you're an employee, that sort of thing. That's a conflict of interest under our ordinances. That's one conflict of interest. The second kind is engaging in any transaction or contract with the county in which the commissioner has a private financial interest. That's a separate kind of conflict of interest as well. And I've got a memo that I've prepared a few years ago that goes more in depth about all this stuff that I'll provide to all of y'all too. Like I said before, under our ordinance, if you have or think you might have a conflict of interest, please give us a call. That's one of the reasons we're here, is to talk that stuff out with y'all. If it's determined that you may have a conflict of interest, there's a provision in the ordinance that says you have to disclose it in writing to the Board of Commissioners. And then they have 10 days to determine whether a conflict of interest exists and issue a written determination. And again, if you have a question about a specific situation, please contact our office. And I'm going to move on to parliamentary procedure unless there's any questions about the conflict of interest stuff. Parliamentary procedures are rules. We use Robert's Rules of Order as our sort of default that help maintain order at a meeting. It's kind of your roadmap to how you can transact business at a meeting. It enables members to take care of business and make decisions in an orderly manner. And the purpose, like I said before, of parliamentary procedure is to facilitate action and not to obstruct it. Some basic principles of this, the presiding officer, which in our case is a chair, facilitates meetings and maintains order, runs the meeting. All members, including the chair, have a right to bring up proposed actions. That means the chair can make a motion. That's a question we get sometimes, is whether the chair can make a motion or second a motion, and they're entitled to participate just like any other member of the planning commission. It ensures that you take up business one item at a time, promotes courtesy and efficiency, and it ensures that all members get the right to participate, speak, be heard, and to vote. So I'm just going to kind of run through some of the things you normally see at a meeting. Main motions, a motion for the commission. To start off an action, someone makes a motion. All motions require a second. You don't even get to a discussion, normally speaking, until there's a second. Once the motion is seconded, it's on the floor and is open for discussion. Some of this stuff is from Robert's Rules of Order, and one thing to keep in mind from that is Robert's Rules is written to govern very large bodies for the most part. So if you've got a 100 or 200 member body, strict adherence to Robert's Rules is a lot more important than it is for these small groups like y'all, because it's a lot harder to keep order. So for instance, this one here about the chair restates the motion prior to allowing discussion to ensue. I've starred that one because that's not, if y'all just start discussing it without the chair saying, okay, I'm going to restate this motion before we discuss it, that's, you can maintain order and still skip this kind of step. Sometimes y'all get emails and stuff accusing you of, well, you didn't do such and such strictly by Robert's Rules of Order. That doesn't invalidate your actions or anything like that, because again, Robert's Rules is about y'all being able to transact your business and to all be on the same page and know this is what we're doing, this is what we're trying to achieve. A motion requires 4 votes for approval. And a question we get sometimes about a second is, just because you second a motion doesn't mean you have to vote in favor of that motion later on. I think some folks think that. But you can second a motion just because you want to have discussion on it. But you're totally obligated to vote against it after, once it comes time to vote. Making motions, to make a motion, commissioners could say things like, I move that the planning commission, recommend approval of this. I move to, or I move that. Best practices, it's kind of best to avoid these kinds of motions. I make a motion to approve, so moved. Calling the question. Sometimes we have folks that want the debate to end and they say, I want to call it the question. That's actually a formal action under Robert's Rules, which requires a 2/3 vote, which is basically a cutoff debate. So just keep that in mind that, you can suggest, hey, let's wrap this up. And if nobody objects, then, the chair can end it. But if you call the question, that's actually kind of making a motion, and you need to actually take a 2/3 vote on that. Now, you don't need a second for that, but you do have to take a vote. So once a motion is on the floor, if no one wants to discuss it, then the chair can immediately move to a vote. Y'all do this in practice a lot anyway. You kind of look around. If no one's ready to speak, then you proceed to a vote. The person who made the motion has the right to speak first, and so the chair can go to them first and say, okay, you made that motion, let's hear from you first. Again, these are best practices, these are not requirements, but the exact wording of a motion or an amendment to a motion should be stated before the vote. And staff, we have, staff here to do the minutes, and so they can be asked to read it back if y'all ever have any questions about that. Yeah, debate, like we said before, is closed either through a lack of further member comments, or successful calling of the question. And then as a chair, when it appears that debate is over, it's always a good practice to say, okay, is there any further discussion, or are we ready for the question? And again, these are actions that y'all take a lot of times anyway. You vote by a show of hands, like we said before, unless you vote against or abstain, then you're assumed to have voted in favor. If the vote's not unanimous for approval, then the chair should ask for all those opposed, and then, if there's no, we still haven't accounted for everybody, then, any of those abstaining. After the vote, the chair announces the results. As Robert mentioned before, a motion fails on a tie vote, so if you have 3-3 and one abstention, or you only have 6 members here, that's a failed vote, and that means no action has been taken. And again, like we said before, the chair can vote and make motions and second motions just like any other member of the planning commission. And that's, I say that because we've had some confusion about that sometimes in the past, where folks thought that they could not take those actions because they were chair. This doesn't happen a lot, but it does come up sometimes, and that's amending a motion that's already on the floor. So sometimes when someone's made a motion and a second, there'll be a discussion like, well, maybe we want to change that motion. You kind of go through the same process in order to amend that motion. So once it's on the floor, someone needs to make a motion to amend and say what that amendment is. That also requires a second. And that motion, that amendment has to be germane. It's got to be related to the pending motion. And like I said, it requires a second. The amendment itself is debatable, so you can discuss it before you vote on the amendment. Then you take your vote, and once you take that vote, then the main motion is amended, and then you still have to take a vote on that amended motion. And I know I ran through that really quick, but if there are any questions about that, yes.
But can I go back to the meeting procedures?
Yes.
Real quick, I do have a question. Why don't we do a sign-up sheet to speak?
You mean on the public comment?
Public comments, where people they have to put their name down and sign up to speak for or against.
Now, are you talking about the public comment
Maybe
items?
public comments, people can get up and speak for or against.
I want to say that was discussed when we formulated the public comment policy, and my memory fails me as to why the planning commission's elected not to incorporate that as part of the, I think it was, I don't remember, I think there was sort of some discussions about should we make people sign up ahead of time, should we make them sign up at the meeting? I don't recall why. Maybe it was just so, maybe there might be someone who, while they're hearing the discussion happen, decides they want to speak about it, and if they haven't signed up, should we keep them from being able to talk about that? I don't know.
It probably makes sense on really, on hot topics.
Well, on hot topics, to me, it just seems like more of an organizational issue for how that portion of the meeting flows, because I know that's popular practice among other,
Yeah.
Now-
commissions and.
Now, we did that at one point, and then, as you stated, there was someone here who heard some of the comments or whatever that was going on and had a desire to speak on that matter, but since they didn't sign up, they were not permitted to speak, so I think that's why they did away with it.
Yeah, and I want to say that maybe the feeling of the planning commission at the time was, well, if they've shown up to the meeting, and they want to speak, we may just be adding a layer of bureaucracy, for lack of a better term, than what we need to make them sign up on a piece of paper first.
Okay. Should we adjourn this session?
Yeah, if there's no more questions, and like I said, if y'all have any questions about any of this stuff, just call me or email me.
Okay. We've got 5 minutes if everyone wants to take a quick break, and then we'll come back here by 6 o'clock and get started on our regular. get our meeting started. We've already done the first part of the pledge. General business, approve the minutes of the regular meeting of the Island Planning Commission held on January 17th, 2023, subject to any necessary corrections. Commission?
Mr. Chair, if I'm in order, I move that the minutes from January the 17th, 2023 be approved with necessary corrections that there should be in.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor of the motion, please indicate by raising your hand. Got anybody? That's unanimous. Okay, thank you. First item on our agenda with public comment is VP 5366117 Mallory Street. Consideration of a village preservation design review approval for improvements to the outdoor seating area and signage at the Sand Castle located at 117 Mallory Street, St. Simons Island, parcel ID 0412055. Melissa Welford and Catherine McDonough. I think I messed up the names, I'm sorry. McDougal. Okay, thank you. Stephanie?
Good evening,
Oh,
Christopher
Chris.
Carey, Glynn County Planning and Zoning. Before you tonight, we have a village preservation application for improvements to the outdoor seating area over at 117 Mallory. The applicant is currently here, and before you now are the current and prior exterior views. So to the left, you have the current view, or currently started demolishing the outside, and to the right, you see what it used to look like prior. Right here is the proposed rendering for the renovation. And here are your possible actions. The applicant is here tonight, and that is all from staff.
Commissioner, are there any questions for staff?
Yeah. Mr. Chair, if I may, for staff, if you can go back to the photo, the rendering, is that, I guess that's a 2x4 fence construction of some kind. Yeah, I think it's up now. Is that meant to be, excuse me, is that meant to be permanent? Or is that construction related, barrier?
It's possibly construction barrier. I went by the site yesterday and I didn't see anything there, but tape, and I didn't take a look.
Okay, I thought I may have seen that. It's not there. Okay.
No, I assume when we can ask the applicant whether that's to corral people through a specific
Okay.
entryway.
Yeah, Commissioner, that may be something we can ask the applicant to
Sure.
explain to us. Any other questions for staff? I just have one, and it's obvious, and we've gotten at least one email concerning the oasis that surrounds the picture we have, and it's obviously the design lacks context. I think the design, personally, this is myself, it's okay, but without seeing the buildings next to it, it's sometimes hard to judge exactly what it looks like in relationship to the entire street. So I think that's a little bit of a flaw in the presentation. I would have liked to have seen it in relationship to the structures next to it. That's just a comment rather than a question, I suppose, but.
I'm sorry, finish. Has the applicant submitted anything for signage on the front of the building?
No, so in the application, it does state that they're improving the signage, but they opted to make another application to bring
Okay,
forth for
fine.
signage.
I missed that part. All right, thank you.
Yep.
Is there any other questions for staff? We can hear from the applicant now. Is the applicant here? Would you care to tell us about your project?
Yes.
Please, come up and state your name.
Hello, I am Catherine McDougald, and my family has owned Sandcastle Cafe for 34 years. So we are rebranding our business to be called King City Kitchen. We decided to defer the signage until we could get to a place in our branding where we felt comfortable enough to bring a sign before you guys. I understand that this lacks a lot of, and leaves a lot up to interpretation as far as our neighbors go. We were just under a time crunch and wanted to get you guys something as quickly as possible. So that is a fence, and it is a permanent solution. My husband can probably better describe what materials will actually make that fence. And it's just replacing the existing deck structure that was there. It's just not very safe. The deck we had before, there was a lot of falls. It kept moisture in there, and so we want to create a nice, clean porch that will allow us to keep it clean and keep airflow and all that good stuff in there.
Now, there was a question about the railing. You want to explain? I think Commissioner Duncan.
That was it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Says permanent.
Yes.
Oh, it is permanent.
Permanent, yes.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Yeah, I do. Thank you for at least addressing the fence railing. Now, I've heard different, maybe your business plan has changed, and that's not necessarily an issue for us, but the usage is. So what would that former front porch become?
The same as it was prior to what we've done. Just a seating porch. The only
Okay.
difference is that it'll be leveled, one level, and instead of the enclosed cedar flower box, we'll have this instead.
Okay, so it'll be outdoor dining.
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay. Right. Because I had heard that maybe you were going to be you were going to have customers there. You were just going to do catering. Has that changed?
Yep, there's been a lot of confusion with all of that, but we're going to be opening as a restaurant. We will have the option for people to rent it for special events like receptions and rehearsal dinners.
So are we being asked to just approve the new facade? Yeah.
Yes.
And there was no way you could superimpose your rendering into a Photoshop photograph to give the neighbors left and right?
I paid somebody to do this, and this is what they delivered to me. It was not something that I was able to get done. I'd be more than happy to have something like that done. So.
You know, we're asked to do kind of architectural preservation, although there's no architectural style that's consistent in the village. But, and don't be offended by this, but that fence railing proposed structure is a little bit underwhelming. So it's hard to kind of judge what's happening or what you really want to accomplish. But you're doing away with the overhead, basically roof.
The awning, yes, sir.
The awning that kind of sheltered a bit of the sidewalk, I guess.
To be honest with you, the reason this was so rushed is the front of the building is actually, there's structural issues that need to be addressed, and we can't move forward with building inspection, all of that good stuff, until we got the facade approved. My number one priority here is to get it structurally safe and looking better than it does as it sits right now. I do agree in that I don't know that this is a wonderful representation of what we have envisioned for the space, but it's unfortunately the best that I could bring.
I would say those sconces are a bit high. Just, you know, I think somebody, like you said, rushed through this to get something approved, and yet we're supposed to judge it for what you're showing us and approve this. And that's a little bit of a concern. I don't want to hold you up in your business. Maybe you can just talk us through that. It's pretty bare looking.
Okay, so right now, what we're proposing to do is to reface the front of the building with stucco in the color called Swiss Coffee. It's an ivory white. Those sconces are actually about 24 inches tall, and they're going to be gas. In between that, you'll have, a sign, which I actually spoke with Mr. Chris Carey today via email, getting exactly what we'll need. I'll have something sign-wise by the end of, this week. I'm, once again, sorry I couldn't get it for today. And this fence that's proposed, it's going to have a countertop for seating on the back side. That's why the, measurements are right there that kind of better show you how high that's gonna be. It's bar height with a black and white penny tile counter. I don't know how to really show that to you right now, other than just how I described it.
So there'll be a counter at the rail?
Yes, it would be for about 10 seats for people to sit at, to look out to the pier.
What, okay, I see the picture here, proposed rendering, but if I look at that and have not heard you say what you're saying, then it would be somewhat misleading
Yes,
or
ma'am.
unclear. Personally, I would like to see something where, you have it included with the other businesses there, exactly what it would be. I would like to see the actual proposed, rendering.
Could you just flip back to the, before, Chris? So we don't really see the neighbors here either.
No.
No?
And I guess, the one question I have, you're showing this large archway, is the top of the arch essentially where the top of that, or the bottom of that beam is now?
Yes.
Right,
So it will arch about like this.
right,
The drawing, I don't think that it's very accurately for what the arch will
right,
be.
yeah, it doesn't appear that the drawing's exactly to scale with what you have there. I think the signage on the front of the new rendering, if you put that back up a second, I think the signage would help make that look something, so we'd be very interested in seeing what you're gonna do with the signage, because I
Yes,
believe
sir.
that's gonna be probably about 90% of the look of it is the sign,
Yes, sir.
because everything else is rather simple and straightforward.
I do have my logo that I can show you guys right now if you would like. That will be the sign. We're in contact with Findig Signs, and I will have a rendering from them by the end of this week.
Can I ask staff a question real quick? So, correct me if I'm wrong, but the reason that you had to rush to get this together, to get this in, is because you can't touch the building any further from this point forward until you get approval from the Allen Planning Commission.
Yes, ma'am.
And you have a structural issue that is happening that you have to address ASAP,
Yes, ma'am.
and can't do that until we approve this.
Yes, ma'am.
Why are there not like any provisions in place for a situation like that? Like for her to, them to be able to proceed with some of it or a portion of it to stabilize it and allow that process to happen, then to give her actual time to give us
That's a permitting issue.
stuff, you know, I mean, but then I guess that goes to,
Well, let me ask a question. Were they stopped at one point?
Yes.
Yes, so actually what happened, they begun construction and they were stopped and asked to get a permit.
There were no permits for the demolition or the removal of the
Right.
material.
That's, so there was an issue there where we've had issues with the village before, where people weren't properly notified that they had to get a permit to do the work. Were you unaware that you needed a permit?
I was not aware that we needed a permit for any of the removal off the front of the building. To be quite honest with you, the porch was completely rotten, and so we thought we were doing everybody a favor by ripping it out. As soon as Chris came by, we, hands off until we got to this meeting.
Okay.
Is the arch design, is that part of the plan to stabilize the structure? Or is that the look you're going for?
That's just the look that we're going for. the design is mid-century modern.
Just a couple of concerns I'd have, not in terms of approving it or disapproving it, but it looks like the way the arch comes down and your entrance there could be an issue with head clearance.
Yes, so that's what I was saying, on the other picture, what it currently looks like now, this arch is not to scale as far as the exact dimensions of how the arch will look at the top.
Yeah.
Essentially, just imagine at the top of that beam where the top of the building ends, there would be two, build outs of like it's not a false arch, and then we'll just box it in and cover it with, stucco, yes, sorry.
Yeah, rather than a full arch, it should be a segmented arch, which
Yes.
then would answer
Yes.
the question about the head height.
I'll make one more design comment, just in terms of the rail system. If that's gonna be a counter that people would sit at and look out at the water, and I know most of our tourists and our guests are dining in shorts and bathing suits, but you may wanna think about some sort of modesty panel or something to incorporate instead of just the fence look, something to sort of tie in with your counter seating.
Question about is that parapet, the existing height, and that will not change? Is that right?
Yes, the existing height will not change.
Okay. You know, my comment to the commission and staff is that it seems like we're rushing through to approve a facade, and yet they're not really ready for that. But they simply want to get it past them so they can move on with their permitting. And it sounds like an occasion where, hey, the permit department needs to provide some. Are you ready to ask for a permit? Do you have drawings?
We have an architect coming tomorrow. We're meeting with an architect tomorrow.
So you're
There is a laundry list of things that have happened inside of the building that we have had to pause to take care of, being that it's a historic building. So those roadblocks have prohibited me from getting with a architect prior to this. My sole purpose here was to get the color changed and what the facade was going to look like so that we could move forward and come back in front of you with a sign at next month's meeting.
What if we approve just the rework of the deck area? In other words, the part behind the facade, any work behind the facade, and then come back with a plan for your signage and a scale drawing of what this is actually gonna look like. I think you'll need that to build the thing, personally. I think right now you couldn't take that and actually construct it without having some drawings. But don't you think that makes more sense? In other words, everything that happens behind that facade, we'll tell you can go ahead and do it. But I'm with Commissioner Duncan that there's a lot of questions.
Has the permit been, you haven't gotten the permit to do anything?
No, ma'am.
Okay. It just, right, you don't have the drawings, permit or anything. It just seems to be so many unanswered questions. I know some are saying, let's go ahead with this, and then they would do that. And we've had that to happen in the past, and they're going to do a question for staff. Do you have anyone who will go out to check to see, that they have done what they said they would do if, I'm not saying whether I will or will not, if, it's approved tonight? Will there be someone to go out to see? And if it's not done, or not done properly, what would be the penalty?
So that would be a building inspection. Building inspector would do the follow-up on any permitting that would follow. And then the rest of that would also follow on code enforcement. So if there is any violations between the use and that will be followed up with code enforcement, and then anything internally will be followed up with the building department.
Okay, if, they're in violation, then what will happen?
They're subject to court fees and court summons.
So was the stop work order based on the village preservation, or was it based on construction permitting?
So when I stopped by, I advised Mr. McDougal that he needs a permit for the work that he is doing. I can't issue a stop work order, but I advise him that he needs to obtain permits and get village preservation approval for the demolition and design work.
The scope on the interior of what y'all are doing, is that gonna require a permit?
We're only for one, we're adding a drain and we're enclosing the kitchen. Everything else is going to stay the same in there, with the exception of moving some of our, cooler equipment around.
What would you be doing with this, with what has happened? What has held y'all up? Other than maybe building out the facade and doing the floor?
I really don't wanna go into extreme detail about all of the wonderful problems that we have found in our building since just, taking the tables outside, to be quite honest with you. But it is a historic building, and there has just been
One thing after
nightmare
another, yeah.
nightmare after another, so.
My point being is that I completely understand what it's like opening a business and then this happens and then you're just all of a sudden like in limbo and you've got all this money out and you're doing all this and then you have to wait and everything. So I'm just trying to help give everybody the picture to see what we can do. Maybe while we wait on an architectural.
What would your next step
rendering.
be? Let's say we were to approve this, that doesn't mean you can start construction tomorrow. You need to go through the process of getting plans and submitting
Yep.
for a permit.
Yes, sir. So
And then
I
you're
would
gonna go through the sign deal.
have these plans back, by the beginning of next week. I would be filing a building permit. I have our contractor ready on go. He's just waiting for me. And then we would go from there, just get going.
But now, that's all fine and good. You've got plans that would be ready next week, contractor's ready to go, but you still have to go through the
Yes, sir. Yeah.
planning, the plan review, the building department and all that. And I don't know what that timeframe's gonna be on something like this. I
Yes, sir.
presume it'd be at least several weeks. And I wish there was some way that you could at least start the permitting process while you revise this drawing, because it's gonna make a world of difference just to have the signage on it, to show basically a rendering of it as to what it's gonna look like with the basic buildings and.
Catch-22. Catch-22. We're in a loop.
Can they start the approval process and the review, at least the review process at the county without our?
Yes, so if there is structural damage, routine maintenance, repairs such as that, those can be made, but as far as the changing of the facade, that has to come through y'all, but a permit to do structural, repairs, that can be made.
That's what I was wondering, if they could go ahead and get that in process, and then basically just
Yes, we could
tag
start
us along
reviewing
with
that.
it after.
Well, I think all of our questions are basically about the facade, are they not? I mean, it's just about that arch and the two lanterns there and the lack of a sign.
Right.
Is that 90% of our questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that's what.
Would the final?
Right, and so,
project's gonna be.
and so back to my suggestion is that we come up with a motion to allow them to do everything else, but just that front facade.
But we don't even need our.
Correct.
They
So
don't
you,
even need our approval to do the structural. They just have to go and get a permit to do the structural.
Well, I think there is the part behind the railing there that does have some impact on what you see. And I guess you could consider that as part of the facade. Any painting or anything they wanna do inside inside there, that would be,
But that's not structural.
no, but it requires our approval.
Correct, and that would be,
And that's what I'm saying, we could approve that, and then with them to come back with the proper context, the arches, the signage, and we could, get that done all at one time.
So, Robert, are you proposing that we make a motion to approve like the garage door and the brick and the stone walls and the door and the fence?
Or are you gonna change that, I guess is what he's asking.
All of that interior part is, as it is right now, that's, cedar wood, not stone. It looks like stone, I'm
Okay.
sorry about that. But yeah, all of that's gonna stay the same. The mural that's up there is going to stay the same as well.
Oh, okay. So just the garage door?
Just the garage door and the front door will change into a updated version of the one we have now.
So we could approve the garage door and the front door?
Well, that's what I'm saying, anything beyond the railing, we could say have at it, and then ask for a revised drawing. I don't think, quite honestly, we have enough to make a decision.
I don't think it helps her with the structural stuff, so
Yeah,
we already know, so.
I think we all wanna help you, but, what I'm getting from all the questions that are being asked is there's too many questions here, and we as a commission are asked to approve a design, and what we've heard tonight is, this isn't quite it.
And I'd hate to approve something and the architect say it wouldn't work, and then she have to come back.
Right, or it's not exactly, in other words, if this isn't exactly it, then we'd be remiss in approving that, if that's not gonna be it, I guess it's. So, commission, do we,
we were just, I was just thinking on the sign, you're bringing that back next month, right? So if this permitting process could get going now, you get your architect going, so you can start work. And then get the design, tie that together with the sign, I don't think that would involve a lot of permitting delays after you already got your building permit.
yeah, let's hear from any comments we might have, and then we can try to put together a motion. Thank you. We'll open it up for anyone who has a comment about this particular project. Mr. Smith, I know you're always game
If
for
no
a
one else
comment.
wants to start, I'll start. I'm Julian Smith.
3 minutes.
My wife and I used to go to to Sandcastle frequently, particularly when we had visitors from out of town, out of state, family and friends. And I would hate to see any delay in reopening what is an important part of our downtown. I've got no objection to what the applicant is proposing, basically, if it fits all of the criteria. What I am concerned about, and what I am objecting to, is that this application was accepted and sent on to you in this form, and I take particular exception to this photograph, which in your document says it's what is proposed. And what is proposed is to, I guess, to plant that tree's not there now, is it? And to tear down all of the buildings on the left, the right, for hundreds and hundreds of feet. That is clearly not what the applicant is proposing to do. And why is it that the community development staff does not help protect applicants from people like me who see these problems? Some of you saw the problems. So I'm really sympathetic to the applicant. I wish he had been given some advice earlier in the process. I also have a slight problem with the constant use, and you find it in this application, to approve improvements. These may or may not be improvements.
Mr.
These are
Chair, Mr.
renovations.
Chair, point of order. Can we get to the
Necessary
point,
renovations.
excuse me, can we get to
Excuse
the
me, I
point?
cannot hear the point of order.
He's,
I'm speaking.
We're not talking about what's at hand. We're talking about process and his lack of appreciation of
Yes,
the
I'm
process.
talking about process.
All right, he's a waste of time. Could we
No.
get to,
The time has been wasted.
no,
Bye.
no,
Thank you.
step back, please.
I will.
Please, officer, step back.
All right.
Mr.
But I'm not the
Smith,
one who wasted
Mr.
the
Smith,
time.
you got 1 minute. You got 1 minute to complete your thought if you'd like to.
You gonna let me complete?
Yes, please.
Thank you. And please don't put your hands on me again, officer. Okay. One problem we have is with the Village Preservation Ordinance itself, which deals with superficial appearances. I've come to meeting after meeting where the same thing happens. Somebody wants to tear down a house and build something in the neighborhood that will be a vacation rental. All you're concerned about is, does it look like the rest of the neighborhood?
Let's keep
You're not preserving the village. I'm sorry, this ordinance does not preserve the village. We need a better ordinance, and this is bigger than this application. So I don't blame you for being impatient with me, Mr. Duncan. You've been impatient before. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Anyone else who would like to comment on this particular project? Hearing none, comments are closed. Commission.
Staff, can I ask a question real quick? When applicants asked to show what they intend to change on their property, are they required to show the neighboring properties as well?
It's not required.
Okay. And would it not incur considerable more expense for them to go and render all the other buildings as well? I mean, it could triple the cost of their rendering to go and show the buildings on either side as well. I think it's obviously just a background they popped in there. I think it's unreasonable to ask them to go and render the whole block when we all know what it looks like. We all see it.
No, I think it would have, I think the applicant would have been better served if they had just given us just the facade.
Or a picture with all three buildings side by side, and we could visualize it in there. But I think it's,
Right. I think it's unfortunate, whoever did that for you was, please, we'll get back to you.
that's it.
But, Mr. Chair, as I said, I understand, I too have been in business, and I know how you have roadblocks and, unexpected things to come about that incurs additional expense, but also I know you have to do things accordingly. And the picture there, as I say before, looking at it, it's misleading to me if I have not heard anything. And I think we should, and if you allow, with the expectation of going ahead that they would do this, this, and this, we're gonna have to be mindful and considerate of other applicants who comes before us, in reference to the same thing. So, that's what I have to say.
Anyone gonna make a motion?
I'm willing. I move to defer the application VP 5366 until the next regular scheduled meeting of the Island Planning Commission.
Can I ask a question of staff?
Let's see if we get a second.
Okay.
Do we have a second? I'll second it.
Okay. Staff, can she make changes to the application between now and then with the signage and all that and update? Okay.
Yes, because it's already on the application for the signage. It would just be submitting additional documentation.
Okay.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion?
yes, sir, Mr. Chair. My concern about deferring this application, it's gonna delay them unnecessarily. They're trying to, I think the community planning is trying to do the right thing because we've had other village businesses get started, in fact, painted the whole building without coming to us. So we're trying to avoid that, and I understand that, but it seems that there should be some allowance to let them carry on and then come back for a facade approval. So I would only be supportive of a deferral if this doesn't hold up their activity.
From what I understand, Chris, they can move forward with everything but the facade.
Right, so we weren't aware of any structural issues until today. So if there's a need to fix something to make it safe, that can be done. But as far as changing a facade, that has to come through you.
Anything that they want to do on the inside doesn't require our approval, right?
Correct.
Could they remove some of the facade to repair the inner workings of it if it's structural?
Yes,
Okay.
And that doesn't require our approval.
that does not require your approval.
Okay, all right, so we have a motion and a second on the floor. Any further discussion?
Wait, just to confirm, the only thing that we're holding up is
The facade.
the arch,
The
the
new
stucco,
design.
the stucco and the sign.
Sign.
Everything else
Can move forward.
can move forward.
Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing
Oh,
none.
wait, Will's got something.
Yeah, but also, they can't move forward on the door or the garage door too, because that's part of the facade,
Okay, all right,
just to make that clear to everybody.
all right, well,
I got a question, I guess. How do we define facade?
well,
Is it whatever's viewable from the street? I mean, so does that include through a window?
yeah, let's see.
Seems
if
to
we
me that
can
you have
get-
an
let's-
exterior
Let's see if we can get an amendment going to include that with the deferral on the facade. Can we do that? Can we get an amendment?
I'm just concerned can they put it in the garage door without the architect being involved in it?
Well-
Is it gonna change?
Please come back up and let's.
Sorry.
let
I'm
me
not trying to
ask
make
you
this
one more
complicated, I
question. This is,
The garage door is not going to need anything structural because all of that is false.
is the garage door changing in context, size?
It'll be in the same footprint as the current window, except there'll be 2 additional panels where there was a cedar wall before. So,
There's a wall, it comes up about hip high. From there down is now cedar, it's gonna be an opening.
So it's gonna be all,
It's gonna go from all the way
all
down.
glass.
As it shows down, all the way to the back.
So the door that you got in that rendering is the door that you'd like to have?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Can we get an amendment?
Yeah, I'm sorry, is it necessary? I didn't hear Will's
Well-
point.
So the ordinance does not just apply to changes to the facade, it applies to any external changes to the building.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so,
And that's considered external.
That's what I was curious.
yeah. well,
'Cause it's not-
it is. Well, let's just cover it. I mean, I think we can do that. Can we get an amendment?
Sure?
Make an amendment?
It needs to be, she made the motion.
No, we can make an amendment, vote on the amendment, like
Okay.
Will said.
That's right.
Well, we have an amendment to defer.
No, we have a motion to defer.
I mean, a motion to defer. So now we're trying to amend a deferral motion with okay to proceed.
Will said I could do this, so I'm gonna do it. I'd like to
Yeah,
make,
you're welcome
I'd like to propose an amendment to the motion. We will defer the facade, as the motion says, with the caveat that we will approve the doors that are behind the front of the building. That's my amendment.
Is that good, Will? Second.
All right, we got a motion for an amendment and a second. We'll ask the question on the amendment.
Good job, Chairman.
All in favor of the amendment, please indicate. Okay,
Well done, sir.
good. So that's unanimous on the amendment. Now we'll vote on the motion. All in favor of the motion, the amended motion, please indicate. That is also unanimous.
Amen.
Thank you. That was a tough one, folks. Okay.
All right.
Okay, this is VP 5385, 217 Mallory, Unit B, St. Simon's Island, consideration of a village preservation design review approval for improvements to the outdoor signage located at 217 Mallory Street, Unit B, St. Simons Island. Rob Robinson applicant, Strother WFJR, and Gordon Thomas owners. Chris, I think this is yours again.
Yes, sir. Christopher Carey, Planning and Zoning. The applicant is requesting village preservation design review for signage at 217 Mallory Street, Unit B, for St. Simons Island Lifestyle, also known as SSI Lifestyle. Currently, there is no signage at the site. Here is the proposed signage, SSI and SSI Lifestyle on a hanging board from the top. The applicant is here, and these are your possible motions.
Anyone have any questions for staff? All right, hearing none, would the applicant like to say anything? Is the applicant here? Yes, sir. Please come forward and state your name.
I'm Rob Robinson. So there's Nature Gifts had 2 stores, and then she downsized, and we took over this one. We both went from the Strawberries. Currently, there's nothing here now. So my proposal is for a sign through Fendig Signs. It is foam. It's a foam sign that they do, and the color would match the wall that's there now. So there'd be no change, kind of, this rendering, the color looks a little bit different, but it would be the exact same as the paint color now. And then we are proposing to do this outrigger sign hanging from the ceiling, just like the rest of these outrigger signs.
Any questions for Mr. Robinson? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Does anyone here would like to make comments, or have a comment or a question about the sign? Hearing none, we'll close the comment period.
Question, for staff, the outrigger signs, I don't believe us, addressing these in the past. Are they just part of the signage ordinance?
Yes, they should be a part, any new outriggers should be coming through you all as well.
And how are, so I know we have, size, restrictions. Are there any restrictions on these outrigger signs, or?
They would fall into the total count of the sign. So they can have a maximum of 3 signs at the site. But as far as the size, there are some regulations on that.
But these signs meet that criteria.
Yes, sir.
So we're doubling the number of signs that are currently there.
Yes.
Because there's 0 signage there now.
No, it's got the natural gifts.
He's not,
Okay, right.
for him.
Yeah, so there are 2 different units under one ownership on one parcel.
Leased to separate parties.
Yes,
2 separate businesses.
2 separate businesses. So you can have 3 signs per business.
Mr. Duncan, is that it? Chairman, I'll make a motion.
Absolutely.
I make a motion to approve, VP 5385 as presented.
A second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, we'll ask the question. All those in favor, please indicate. That is unanimous. Thank you. Okay.
We have II-13208, St. William's Catholic Church cupola height exception request. This is a request for an exception to the height limit for a new cupola on the existing church located at 2300 Frederica Road, St. Simons Island, parcel 04022452. Zoning ordinance section 617 allows an applicant to request a height exemption to be reviewed by the Planning Commission. St. William Catholic Church is the applicant. Stephanie?
Thank you. Stephanie Leaf, Planning Manager. So, St. William Catholic Church has an existing skylight that's in their sanctuary that they've stated is leaking, and so they are looking to do a replacement. Instead of doing a replacement with a typical skylight, they are looking to do a new cupola in the same location. This property is zone plan development, and there's a 35-foot height limit. So they are looking to go to 39 feet 8 inches, so the cupola is 4 feet 8 inches. They do have an existing bell tower on the property that does already well exceed the height limit, so this cupola is not going anywhere close to what the bell tower is in height. But because it is exceeding the 35 feet, it is required to come before the Planning Commission for a review. So we don't have these come through very often, so I'm not sure if any of the Planning Commissioners have seen these in the past, but there is a section of the zoning ordinance that does allow these kind of exceptions to go before the Planning Commission for review, different than what we would be doing as a variance that would go to the Board of Appeals. So here is the St. William Church property. And in this top view here, you can see this is the existing bell tower, and then this is where they would do the new cupola. Just a rooftop view of it. And this is the elevation. So as I mentioned, in the zoning ordinance, you all do have the ability to take a look at these. There's just specific height exceptions that can go before you all. And so there is some criteria for the Planning Commission to consider. So since part of this is cut off, I'm just going to read this through. This is when considering an exception, the Planning Commission must consider the following factors. Maintenance of aesthetic appeal of the neighborhood, safety of any structure to be built above the maximum height in case of high winds, the specific need of the property owner for the exception, availability of alternative means of satisfying the owner's need, impact on property values in the neighborhood, and any other adverse impacts on surrounding properties. These are your possible motions to approve with modifications. You can defer this if you need additional information, or deny the height request. And I believe is Mr. Rule from St. Williams. Okay, thank you. We do have an applicant for this evening. Thank you.
Does anybody have, just a second, does anybody have any questions for staff? Is that right? Did I do that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any questions?
My only comment is that on the background, it says that, maybe this is in the ordinance, that it requires approval of the Glynn County Planning Commission. Not Allen Planning Commission.
That was before we were created.
Possible.
Yes, I believe that's exactly when it was one planning commission for the whole county. So this is an older ordinance section that we don't see very often.
Okay.
All right, I'm Joe Combs. I'm with Ursa Rural Architects, and here representing St. William's Catholic Church in this subject. So if you've got any questions, we are trying to solve a problem that we've got with the skylight that's existing, and went with a cupola design so that we can maintain some clear story lighting, windows, still get some natural light in the sanctuary without the excessive heat load that the large skylight provides. So.
All right, thank you. Does anybody have questions for the applicant? Okay. This will be open for public comment, so if anyone would like to speak, please come state your name. And remember, you have 3 minutes.
Julian Smith again. I certainly approve of what they are, or support what they're proposing to do. I'm an old altar boy. Was married in a Catholic church 59 years ago. et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I taught at several Jesuit institutions, including Georgetown. So this is fine. It would be interesting to know, however, how 4 pages of designs, all marked as designs for a copula, which is in logic a well-known term, and in grammar a well-known term, something that connects two things, predicate to a subject or to an act, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The problem I have with that word, of course, is the root for copulation. And I just don't understand how members of an architectural firm, all college educated, managed to make that silly mistake, and why there was no one in the community development department who could recognize that there was a contradiction between parts of the application that applied for a cupola and a copula. It's just silly, and another waste of time.
Like this.
Yes, I've just wasted your time because someone wasted my time by accepting an application that obviously had flaws. And I will keep coming back again and again and explaining this to you. This is something you new members don't know about. This is a tendency I have. And I wish that the chair had explained why he was recusing himself, and maybe he can explain how that word got into the application, into the design. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I think it was an honest mistake. I don't think that anyone meant for the word that you're intending, so, for the record. All right, does anybody else, would anybody else like to come and speak for or against this? All right. Does anybody have any comments, questions?
I've got a question for Will. Maybe this is not the right time, but conflict of interest is when you stand to benefit if the application is approved or denied. Is that correct? So if he had already done the work, Mr. Ursford's firm had already done the work, he doesn't really have anything to gain if it's approved, right?
I think that's a conversation better have between me and Mr. Usry at a different time.
Okay, just for personal future reference, that's all.
Well, it seems like a very nice design, probably more compatible than the current skyline. So I think it's an improvement, even though it exceeds the building height limitation. So I think aesthetically it adds value. I hope I'm not wrong.
No, I agree. All right, does anyone have anything else?
Chair, Vice Chair, I'll make a motion, if you will entertain one.
I will.
I'll make a motion to approve as presented II 13208.
Does anyone have a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, raise your right hand. That's okay.
Mr. Smith, spell check isn't always helpful.
Spell check won't help you with that. Spelling is fine, it's just the wrong word.
Okay. All right, this is a public hearing, conditional use permit 4212 13th Street, St. Simon's Island, additional use permit, consider a conditional use permit for improvements seaward of the development setback line pursuant to zoning ordinance section 727, Beach and Dune Protection District. Property is located at 4212 13th Street, St. Simon's Island, parcel number 0402999. Property is zoned one-family residential R6 and Beach and Dune Protection District. Blake Hightower Land Design Associates LLC, agent for John Shelton and Pamela Flick, applicants and owners. This was deferred from our last meeting.
Thank you. This is CP 5357, and as the chairman stated, this was deferred from the January meeting to this meeting because the IPC did want some additional information on the jurisdictional determination from DNR. So that was something that the applicants did go back and submit. That's in your packet. I've got it up on the slide tonight, as well as there was a revised plan that was submitted. I know one of the staff comments from the prior was to ensure that it's only native landscaping that's being planted seaward of the development setback line. So they did update that plan to show that. And so that is, that revised plan that was submitted is in your packets, and we have it here as well. So I'm happy to answer any other questions. Both Mr. Hightower as well as Dan Busey are here representing the applicant tonight.
Stephanie, I don't think Dan's not involved in this project.
Oh, you're not on this, I'm sorry, okay. I'm sorry, he is on the next one. So Mr. Hightower is here representing this applicant.
Any questions for staff at this point? I think we had lots of questions the last time. Mr. Hightower?
The elevation,
If you would state your name. So we
Sorry,
can get it on the record.
Blake Hightower of Land Design Associates.
Thank you, sir.
In our last meeting, the two things that were asked of were the DNR delineation. Got that updated from Beth, stating that the line is updated, and due to us sending the plans prior to the expiration date of this March, we can continue using that line. And then, Mr. Duncan, one of the things that you mentioned was bringing the, that's not a,
Next one.
bringing the masonry wall back to the toe of the dune line and not extending past it. So we went ahead and made that revision as well.
I recall two other items that we had concerns about. One was the outdoor fireplace. Has that been removed, or?
It's not removed, and it's a modular unit, not a built-in fire.
Okay,
Yes.
interesting. And then the building footprint, is my recollection, actually extended into the setback.
That was.
Was that a different
Both of those were for the previous one last month.
Okay,
It,
Previous-
the one that we saw before this, that was also with Blake Hightower.
you're right.
The building
So it's not the
cantilevers are
same.
Not the same.
I think this one does protrude just slightly.
There is
Yeah.
a portion of the existing home that does extend into the development setback line, but that's existing and stays.
It's existing.
Correct, it's existing. Yeah, it's in this location here, and it is a two-story porch, but it's an existing.
Right.
Yeah, this is the site of the old ship house, is it not?
No, this
No.
is East Beach, 13.
No,
Oh, is it the shipment?
yeah, you got the old, I guess you guys are old enough to remember that. There was a house there, it was called the ship house, and it looked like a ship. And actually forward of that structure was a bow that was built, and it was into that dune field when I was very young, probably 8 or 9 years old. Coming to St. Simon's was always a great thrill, and we'd always go by the ship house and look at it. So this particular site has had a rather storied past. Anyway, for what it's worth.
Any other questions?
I've got a question. I noticed, in your square footage calculations, you don't have the driveway included in with your hardscape?
And this is all for the DNR permit, and it's outside of the,
It's, well, the calculations for the DNR permit are for the total lot square footage.
it's for the area, the subject parcel within the jurisdictional area.
But they look at, the DNR looks at the whole parcel.
They haven't made any comments at this point for that.
Okay. Have you applied for, I mean, are you?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm in the
That'll,
process of-
because it has to be a third of the property has to remain in a natural state
within the jurisdictional area.
with it.
Help out the DNR practices is 33% of the jurisdictional area.
Only?
Learn something new every day.
Any other questions for the applicant or staff? Thank you, Mr. Hightower. Please stay on standby. We'll make the questions as we get into our discussion. Commission, any thoughts?
I go with, looking at staff comments, and it says staff notes that the landscape type for some of the plant materials are not indicated, so staff has suggested a condition that all material shall be native.
I can address that, Commissioner Rooks. Yeah, that was my comment with the application that came before you all in January. They have since revised their plan. They do show that the lawn area will be a low native species. So I did not update my staff report to reflect that, but the plan does show that, so I'm no longer suggesting that condition. Thank you for asking that.
So just to clarify, the comments from our last meeting, those have been addressed and
Yeah, when the staff reviewed it, I felt that it was addressed, but if there's anything additional that you all recall from conversation, feel free to bring that up.
Can you remind me of the height of the retaining wall, the masonry retaining wall?
Mr. Hightower, please approach the podium. We'd like to get it recorded.
Yes, the retaining wall will be built 18 inches above final grade. We're still looking to get final elevation shot from the toe of the dune, but we're working on it, and once we get level grade, it'll be 18 inches above finished grade.
Okay. Just wondering if that dune's gonna end up working its way over that wall.
There's always a chance.
Thank you.
Yep.
Commission? Any other questions, comments, motions? I think that, it seems like the feeling the last time was this was all over the dunes, right? That was the feeling we had the last time, and the concern was, or how do we go forward from this point with any application that's in the same situation? And Mr. Hightower, I guess that's our issue, is there's not a lot of guidance as to how, the guidance to us is how to proceed other than public comment, which we'll get to right now. So we will, all those who would like to comment on this, please come forward. Mr. Smith, I'm sure you have
Well, if
something
no
to
one
say.
else wants to start, I'll let them. I hope they won't scare other people away.
Yeah, Mr. Smith, you got 3 minutes as always.
Yep. I'm Julian Smith again. I have no problem opposing what is proposed here. This is too much house for a small lot. It's already built. But that's another problem. I don't know what the total impervious surface can be on a lot, but gee, this looks like they have pushed the limit, maybe a bit beyond. The applicants clearly had the option to build a smaller house, rather than plan to rip up native vegetation and intrude into the Seawood setback, or the Seawood protection district, the dune protection district, rather, with more stuff. I'm gonna, this one so much annoys me, I'm almost speechless. And also, it's a cliche. I saw this neighborhood in 1946, and there were a lot of smaller houses. There were a lot of small cottages all along, though they tended to be bigger on East Beach. And they're getting humongous. It's, people are sinking their money into stuff like this. They have a right, but you're not required to help them. Okay. Several weeks ago, I noticed that there were no signs up on this property. There was no public notice sign. I called that to the attention of Ms. Leaf, who told me, well, there'd already been signs up before the public hearing that was canceled. There was an earlier public hearing that was canceled. So there was no obligation on the part of the county to put up a sign. And perhaps as a courtesy to me, then a sign was put up. Now there is a sign on the property, or was yesterday. I see a bigger problem. No one in that neighborhood, who lives in that neighborhood, who lives further down the beach, who lives more than, 300 feet away from this property, would know what's happening. Because there's no signage on Bruce itself. There really should be a sign. This is a bigger issue for other projects. There really should be a sign on anything that leads into a dead-end street. Now, I don't know how many bedrooms or bathrooms this is gonna have, but people on that street, on 13th Street, are going to be impacted by this if this turns out to be another vacation rental. Because there's very little space to park. Yeah, there's a garage, and there's a driveway, but it's very hard to maneuver there. And I noticed that some of the neighbors have put up caution tapes to keep people from blocking their driveways and so on. So something like this, that's bigger than it used to be, is a problem. But it's too late. The house is built. That doesn't mean that you need to go along with this.
Time, Julie.
It's 5 minutes.
Three minutes.
I'm sorry?
3 minutes.
This is a public hearing. It's a public hearing,
Oh, it's 5 minutes?
and I've spent 4 minutes.
Pardon me.
But I'm about done.
Okay, please proceed.
But I'll stand here for just a minute and say, I know you're going to approve this, but I really wish you wouldn't. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Anyone else? This is a public hearing. Yes, sir. Please state your name.
I'm Walt McCandless, and our home is right next to the applicant's house. I have some questions, and I was here last month as well, but I still have a little bit of confusion about some of the process and all. But first of all, I know that they did redraw this to make sure that they did not go over the DNR line. There's also a county setback line, 25 feet, I think, landward, if you will, from the DNR line, that maybe that isn't enforced anymore or something, I don't know, but that I do believe, as I looked at it, if you move 25 feet back from the DNR line, that's gonna eliminate the pool. That's a question. Also, if the Department of Natural Resources on the 14th of March, when they come, I'm assuming they come back out and redo the DNR line, they say it's good for a year, and if they come back and move that line landward, I just was curious if that would affect the project, and what would happen then. Also, as I understand it, if y'all approve this will go to the Glynn County Board of Commissioners, and then from there, it has to be approved by the Department of Natural Resources itself. So if at any time in that process, the DNR moves that line landward, will it affect the project itself? Or if y'all's approval will simply allow this project to go through without anything?
I would assume if it doesn't get, if the approval's not finalized in time, then yes, it could be a problem.
Okay.
Right. So there's several steps involved in the approval.
Yeah.
Right.
Another question was the process in construction. As you mentioned, there's very little room on the lot for them to get equipment in to actually do construction. And I was wondering if the dunes would be protected from, say, construction equipment, bulldozers, digging equipment, cement trucks, things like that, as they tried to maneuver to get around in order to build a pool, and whatever, all the other stuff in there. But again, another question. Two others real quick. There are these very large white sandbags that were put in years ago when the tides were threatening the house. And I was curious as to whether those will be removed or if they will stay. And I don't know the answer to that question. If they're removed, it's obviously going to affect the dunes. They become more of a part of the dunes now. And lastly, the beach access on 13th Street, will that be affected? So those are just some questions that we had in kind of seeing this and hoping y'all can provide some answers or someone can. Thank you.
The applicant, would you care to answer some of those questions, please? We can start with beach access.
Yes, Blake Hightower again with Land Design Associates. So the beach access, 13th Street beach access will not be harmed in any way. It's going to stay continuous just as it is. The development setback line that you spoke to, that is why we're applying for a permit, conditional use permit, to get zoning approval to go to the DNR for the permit process that's going on with all of this.
If you could address.
Sorry, so we are.
Talking to the microphone.
So we are asking the correct channels to get permission to do all of this that we have shown. So yeah, I think we're following the best we can to do what we're doing.
In terms of one of the questions was, is there any of the activity, construction activity,
Yeah.
going to end up moving any of the sandbags that are currently there?
There are a few sandbags that will be removed, and those sandbags that were there were put in place and paid for by the current owner of the house, and be replaced with the masonry wall as.
Then another question was, are the remaining dunes, or the dunes that are not going to be affected, are they going to be protected somehow?
Yeah, they'll be.
Are they going to have silt fence or something to protect the dunes?
Yes, we'll have some sort of protection, so that no equipment or anything happens seaward of the DNR line.
I think another question was about construction equipment, laydown area. I realize that the majority of this is, there's a terrace that'll be built, a wall that'll be built, and then a swimming pool. There's no vertical construction other than the wall, correct?
Correct.
His other question was, if the DNR jurisdictional line expires on March 14th of this year, which is just, 2 weeks and some change away.
So original application was sent in, at the time when I didn't realize, I thought DNR came before the county. I thought federal state came before, so I was misinterpreted that. They sent me in this direction because the application was turned in prior to that line expiring. Then we are allowed to continue moving forward with the line as is.
It's up to them, so.
Okay,
I've got a question after the public comment period, I guess.
well, public comment, well, I think it's closed. Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment? Mr. Boosie?
Mr. Chair, before we change speakers, there was one question. The gentleman wasn't clear on what's allowable usage within the county setback. I think you asked about the swimming pool.
Yes, and I pulled that, I pulled that up.
Short answer is it's allowable use.
Yeah, the conditional use is allowed, or not allowed, but they can apply for. Let's see, conditional uses, new construction of seawalls, jetties, bulkheads, revetments, groins, breakwaters, pervious streets, utility lines, swimming pools, decks, boardwalks, fences, storm drain systems, and beach crosswalks and crossovers. Those may be considered for conditional use.
Right.
It doesn't mean they'll be awarded, but they may be.
That's the application.
Any other questions for Mr. Hightower? Thanks.
So not currently.
Yeah, be on standby. Anyone else who would like to speak? Please state your name.
Dan Busey, Resource and Land Consultants. Just to confirm to y'all, the JD lines, once set by the DNR, are good for a year from the date that they visit the property, not necessarily the date of the letter, but once an application is submitted, it runs with that application, will be remain valid during the application and the issuance of the permit and run for the life of the permit. It's not uncommon to take a year from the time we delineate something to get it surveyed, to get through the committee process, and if it kept changing in the middle of the game, there is an allowance under the state law for minor adjustments. The staff reserves the right to inspect the property right before construction and make minor adjustments if there's accretion or erosion. So, but it's good, it's good, it's still valid.
Anyone else have a question for Mr. Boosie? Thank you. That's it? Anyone else who'd like to comment, have anything to say about this? Close the public hearing.
Mr. Chair, I got a question about, I don't really see all this surface runoff addressed from the pool deck. Where's all that gonna be going?
Mr. Hightower, I think you're on deck again.
Yeah, we're still working through a lot of the runoff issues with the remaining design of the property, but it will be addressed. Most everything is sand set, pavers for permeability, and open soil calculations, so.
Okay, thank you.
I've got one comment, and that's building, we've got two basic conditions on St. Simon's. We got the East Beach condition where we've got dunes, I guess, I can't remember exactly where the rocks start and stop. There's no rocks in front of this property, or, no, there are rocks here. Aren't they buried? Yeah. And so those sandbags, if you will, are on top of the rocks? Or are they behind it?
I'm not exactly sure the exact location since they're covered.
And the rocks go all the way to Gould's Inlet. All right. Yes, sir. It seems like you have some history. Please enlighten us, if you will.
I do have some history, but I don't know how much enlightenment I can give. The sandbags are closer to the house, the rocks are closer to the ocean. So they're not on top of
So
each
the
other.
rocks are ocean water.
Right,
or
the
sea
rocks, the Johnson rocks are down there by the ocean.
water. Okay. And Mr. Busey, you have any knowledge of that at all? Thank you. And I guess the reason I bring that up is because I guess there's been a lot of stabilization done in that area over the years. We got rocks, now we got big sandbags. This is sort of a peculiar situation. And now we got sandbags that have turned into what we're now saying are sand dunes. So this is kind of an odd situation in that we've got a rock revetment, which according to our ordinance, we would be measuring, if the rocks were exposed, we'd be measuring the jurisdiction line from midpoint of the rock revetment, not from the high point or the toe of the dune.
Further seaward.
Which would be further seaward by a margin.
Right.
Right. And so this is a situation where we've got sand blowing that's caused all this buildup. But by the same token, they are sand dunes. So I don't know how. I don't feel warm and fuzzy about the application myself, Commission. I don't know how the rest of you feel, but I'd like to hear some thoughts.
Just to clarify, the things we asked for last time have been met. The changes.
Everything I see has been met. We have applications come in front of us often to put in pools and pool decks in the development setback, and we do it all the time. And I think he's inside the development setback. So I don't see really what makes it very different. It looks very heavy, but I think he meets all the criteria that we are allowed to approve if we'd like to.
Right. And that's why we're here to make a decision, right?
So if you want to entertain a motion, I make a motion to approve, recommend approval for CUP 5357.
Speak up.
I'll second that.
Thank you. All right, we've got a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion?
I would like to point out, just to clarify one of Mr. Smith's comments, the house was built in 2003 prior to the current owners, so they didn't have an option to make it a smaller house.
Well, and I've got another comment related to that. The ship house was even bigger than that house. So it's, you know, it was quite a sight to see. Any other discussion on the motion? Hearing none, we'll ask the question. All in favor of the motion, please indicate by raising your hand. All opposed? Motion carries.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I need to recuse myself for this one. Will, do I need to leave or can I stay up here? Just look.
Last one.
Okay, this is CUP 5372, 1312 Caroline Lane, Sea Island. The conditional use permit, consider a conditional use permit for native landscaping, pool deck, and retaining wall seaward of development setback line pursuant to zoning ordinance section 727, Beach and Dune Protection District. The property is located at 13112 Caroline Lane, Sea Island, parcel number 0500453. Property is zone 1 family residential R12 and Beach and Dune Protection District. Dan Busey, Resource and Land Consultant LLC, agent for David Y. Milliken IV. Ms. Lee.
Thank you. This is CUP 5372 at 1312 Caroline Lane. This is the location here. There was an existing house that was demolished on the property. There's a new house under construction here. And they are proposing to do native landscaping, pool deck, and a retaining wall. Their actual pool is landward of the development setback line, and they do have a 25-foot development setback on this property. So this is the survey from the jurisdictional determination that indicates where the development setback line is. And this is their proposed plan. This is where their native land, this red line is the jurisdictional determination line as well as the county setback line. So they are proposing new palms, native landscaping. This is their proposed pool and spa, but then there's just this portion of the retaining wall and pool deck that is that's seaward with a setback. And these are your possible actions. And Mr. Dambusi is here for this application, and he's welcome to answer, he can answer any questions as well as I can as well. Thank you.
Any questions for staff? I think the only question is just one of clarification. That red line we see going adjacent to the pool, that is the jurisdiction line?
Yes, sir.
All right, okay.
Yeah, it's jurisdictional as well as the county's line.
Right, and so actually, the only part that we're actually considering is I think it's mentioned on there about 3 feet of the deck that's beyond that, and then there's some natural landscaping that's proposed as well.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
In a retaining wall.
Yes.
Where's the retaining wall?
It's the two, you can't really see it, but
Dan Busey, Resource and Land Consultants.
Okay, right. So it's part of that, it's part of that pool deck?
Right.
Right, okay.
The dune line's out here, this is the property line, dune line plus 25 feet for the county, and DNR line is that line, and native landscaping and only 206 square feet out of 4,000.
And Mr. Busey, on the 2000, I think it was 2009 survey, it shows a rock revetment. Where is that rock revetment?
It's covered under the sand now from the nourishment.
So now when the DNR measures, and again, we've got two ways of measuring. We can measure from the rock revetment and from the sand dune. So how does the DNR make a decision?
yeah.
It's the landward most. It's actually quite common to have the revetment exposed, and as long as you have sand that can accrete or erode, it's always the landward-most part.
Okay.
So,
And I think our ordinance actually clarifies that. It says the most seaward structure, be it a sand dune or a.
And you're saying landward though?
it's
I mean,
the
most
landward, yes, sir.
Yeah,
It's on the back side.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions or any further questions for Mr. Busey?
No.
Thank you, sir. This is a public hearing. I'll open the floor up. Mr. Smith, you can't just do a thumbs up or a thumbs down? And you do have 5 minutes, is that?
5 minutes.
That's it. All right, 7:20.
All right, Julian Smith again. I have not been able to go over to Sea Island to see whether they have already torn down the original house. Maybe they have no, if they've already started building this new one and built the new one, they have some difficulties. What is not to like here? This is wonderful. Somebody from away from the island spent $9.3 million on a tear down. $9.3 million. Because that's how valuable a seafront lot is. So I imagine there are going to be more tear downs like this, more obscenities of this kind. This is a large lot, but the design shows a motor court, an arrival court, a garage, et cetera, et cetera.
Is this an existing structure?
Why couldn't the house have been set further back? Why couldn't it be smaller? Why do they have to dig a hole in what is now stable soil to put in this pool. Putting in a big pool, you're gonna need a big hole. So they're gonna disturb what is settled soil to do this. And that, I suspect, weakens the shoreline. I've got many notes on this. You've got a long set of documents. And I'll say one thing about the documents submitted by Mr. Milligan. Nothing is redacted. Go back and look at the last one for the house on East Beach. Even information on the tax card is redacted. All kinds of names are redacted. I don't know why. Maybe
talk about
somebody
it.
has something to hide. Okay, I'm done. I'm not even gonna stick around to hear what you decide to do about this. I'll read
You have
about
a good
it.
evening.
Thanks, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Smith.
Good evening. Peter Schmidt, I'm a lawyer with Taylor Oduchowski Schmidt and Crossland Law Firm. I've been retained by some adjacent property owners regarding this. And one of the concerns preliminarily that they have with this is the retaining wall aspect of this, including the encroachment. I'm not here to ask that you deny this, that I am asking that you defer this for at least 30 days so my clients can assess the situation. Their first knowledge of this was 2 weeks ago or thereabouts. What's curious about that is that this has appeared in a plan that is part of the application back in April of last year, as I recall. I may be off on that. I take that back. It was June. Prior to that, there'd been a survey that showed all the bounds, but then the drawings by the architect showed the encroachment in this. So they have known for at least 8 months that they were encroaching in this before everything was approved, but they didn't tell their neighbors, among other things, to be able to assess the situation. So my clients would like to assess that situation. Certainly, as many of y'all know, that water can have a great effect in displacement on adjacent properties. There are no retaining walls, to the best of my knowledge, on either of the properties, on either of the sides of this property. So again, I'm not a professional in the area of hydrology and other matters related to that, but all I'm asking for is a period of, which I think is a reasonable period of time, of 30 days in order to properly assess the situation, to perhaps prevent damage to my client's property. Particularly, I believe it's reasonable given that they've known this information for at least 8 months and it's not been shared.
Which direction is your client's property?
It is north of this property, yeah. So therefore, I just ask that this be deferred for 30 days so that can be assessed by my clients. Thank you.
Anyone else? Hearing none, last chance. Yes, I'm going to close the public comment and ask for a rebuttal.
Dan Busey, Resource and Land Consultants, agent from McMillan.
The area he's speaking about is 0.5% of this entire shore protection in Tennessee. So this is all pervious, 0.5%. I don't think stormwater or runoff would even be a concern.
Again, Mr. Busey, point out the retaining wall that that was, and so, so, so the retaining wall and as it relates to the northern property, how far are we away from the end of retaining wall to the northern property line?
From his client's house, property,
But it's,
considerable.
Tax parcel back.
Is that 75? That's 150 feet, right, of ocean frontage, probably?
I think it's,
Most of the
Which
lots.
property, sorry, which property are we concerned with?
The one to the north of this blue
Well, there's
star.
two, kind of divides the,
right, I think the one that
Northeast?
Mr. Smith was talking about was his client's property would be the one that's up to the right.
That's correct.
top of the star.
North
Right.
of the star.
So, you know, we're almost, you know, just guessing at it, we're probably 75 feet or so.
The blue star, that's 150 feet of ocean front, and then the neighbor's property to the north is only 75, which is typical. Most Sea Island lots are either 150 or
Right,
75.
okay, so the northern property is 75 feet wide, and then we got a double lot in the middle,
That's right.
150 feet.
Yeah, so from the middle of that.
So, go back again, if you will,
About
to
75 feet.
to the drawing of the application there. So, and I guess the end of the pool deck's also the end of the retaining wall, Mr. Boosie, is that right?
No,
Or does it go further?
goes to the steps of the pool, it looks like here.
Right, so it doesn't quite go to the pool deck. And again, in terms of the magnitude of the construction is just that, it's just the retaining wall, which is, what, 4 feet off the setback line at the largest place. In other words, I guess what I'm trying to say is we wouldn't be here if they had moved it over 4 feet.
Correct.
Correct?
Yes.
The rest of the house and what's going on, it's not part of what we're
Right,
doing.
I would think there'd be a minimal impact on the property to the north in terms of that piece of the project. And no comment about the house itself, but just the piece that we're concerned about tonight is the pool deck and the bulkhead. So I would think there'd be a minimal impact to the northern property or the southern property for that matter.
Sea Island Company also has a very intense architecture review, so they're looking at these things.
Have they done their review yet?
Of course, they've had the house is under construction.
Yes.
So
Okay.
This has already been.
So they've done,
Yeah, and then we
so,
have,
so it's gone through a review process, and they've approved this plan as drawn?
yes, sir.
So this is the last piece of the puzzle for the approval process.
And Sea Island also.
Then to the Board of Commissioners, and then to the
Right,
state
the
attorney.
DNR.
Stephanie, if we were to recommend approval tonight, when would this go on the agenda for the county commission?
We have this noticed for, let me double check, I think it's the March 16th. Yes, March 16th, Board of Commissioners.
Okay, so I'll give the neighbors 2 weeks to look into it and have a chance to appeal to the county commission during public hearing.
Is that make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve, Talk.
Also,
Can we have a recess? So I can speak with,
What?
Chairman, they're asking your question.
can I have a 5-minute recess before you make a motion?
Sure.
I'm making,
To speak to my client?
Okay. I don't know if it's necessary. Yeah, make it as quick as possible, please. I'll turn into a pumpkin at 8 o'clock.
What's the motion? Is the motion to approve?
I've not made it yet, but it was
Yeah,
about to
he
be.
Yeah, I don't.
Maybe they don't want that.
anything coming up for next meeting, Stephanie, that you know about? Anything on the horizon?
Are we in a break though for the meeting? Should we take a full break?
Yes, we are on break.
Stay put.
Okay. Never mind. Just trying to make the time go.
Send her an email.
Okay. Mr. Bishop, you got some words for us?
Only that, just as I said, that, it's our belief that the neighbors, the Sea Island process, everything has been followed, and they've had every opportunity to see what's going on and see these plans. And like you said, as Mr. Torres
Right, so
pointed
it's-
out, they can show up and the Board of Commissioners meeting.
Right, so they've gone through, let's say you've gone through the entire Sea Island process, house is under construction. The pool was approved by Sea Island, I assume, as part of the construction project?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I just point out that, Sea Island's got very stringent requirements for site coverage and stormwater retention as well. They don't allow you to push your stormwater to neighboring properties. You have to maintain it all, and they account for all of that.
I'm going through it now.
That's right.
Couple
It's not uncommon to have underground detention construction.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't happen, so
Right,
should not be an issue.
right, and these open soil requirements and so forth.
That's right.
Right, okay. Any other discussion? We got a motion that was about to be made?
I'm about to make it again. I make a motion to recommend approval of CUP 5372 as presented.
I second.
Got a motion and a second on the floor. Any further discussion necessary? Hearing none, we'll ask the question. All in favor of the motion, please indicate. That's everyone here. One recused themselves, okay? All right. I think that concludes our agenda tonight, other than adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
All those in favor may leave.